Well, oh, this is wonderful. I'm here with a new friend. You might have caught him just for a moment there meditating, which is one of the wonderful things he does and one of the wonderful things he inspires us all to do. I met Hugh in what was it, Hyde Park in London just a year ago or so, and really spotted, I knew immediately that he was a deep meditator. You can see that often in a person's eyes or just in their manner. And was very excited when we spoke, and we had a lot of things in common, including political action. We're both authors. Hugh has written a couple of really excellent books on habit change and using mindfulness to do it, one of which is just launching this week. So please look for it. Habit Swap, I believe, is its name. And but he has so much depth and intelligence as well as presence. I long to talk with him. I have so many questions. I don't know where I'm going to begin or where we're going to go. But he, I don't know if I need to, he's a mindfulness teacher. He and I together are now teaching with Kaira Jewel Lingo, a monthly mindful engagement Zoom experience for people. You're welcome to join. I think the next one is April 29th. And well, he's a lover of poetry, which I love, PhD, law background and all this, but he's really just right here, which is what I love most. So Hugh, whatever I've misframed there, please correct. And please welcome Hugh Byrne.
Thank you, George. You know, everything you said, you know, kind of, it's all kind of definitely in the ballpark of who I am and where I am. It sounds like we just bumped into each other in Hyde Park, but it was a little bit more like, you know, through my partner and your wife and
Exactly.
connection and setting that up. But it was a lovely, memorable experience just a year or so ago. And it seems like a century ago with everything we're going through right now, doesn't it? Everything seems from before about a month ago seems like another era, doesn't it?
It does. And I mean, you and I really connected because of the connection, the intermingling of mindfulness, which was what brought our spouses together. Your spouse actually leading a program that Kathy's becoming a mindfulness, official mindfulness teacher as well. And but we were connected through mindfulness and also concerns, great concerns about democracy and about civil rights and social justice and all of these things happening. And we both have a love of the UK and of the US. You're living in the US now. My having spent months, a year over the last 15 years in the UK. So, and all of that has, you know, diminished, hasn't it? Because of the plague that we're fearful of, that we're in the midst of. Yeah. How do you hold that, Hugh? How do you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. We are in the middle of something that's really, really very profound. When you're in the middle of something, you don't necessarily kind of see all of the context or see it in a kind of a broad historical terms, but it's really an unprecedented time we're living in, isn't it? You have to, something that's so worldwide and affecting everybody. No one's immune from it right now, from the virus. We'd have to go back to something like, you know, World War II or the flu of 1918, over 100 years ago, something that's so all-encompassing, such dramatic impacts on our personal lives, but on the economies and political systems and particularly, you know, so many people here in the US, over 3 million people losing their jobs in just the last week, and that's likely to increase. And just it's profound what we're right in the middle of. Yeah. And the way I kind of experience it is, given, you know, that we've had the great fortune to connect with these timeless practices of mindfulness and compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, all of these skillful practices and skills really helps us, I think, certainly helps me to be in the midst of this in ways where, even though I feel, I feel fear coming up, I feel the different emotions coming up, I know I have the tools to be able to kind of go with the flow of that experience and intentionally come back into the world with as much compassion and caring, and just recognizing that we're really all in this together. So I just take great refuge and great comfort in these practices that I think are an enormous benefit in these times. And we know this, and we've talked a lot about it, and our program is really exploring this. So.
Yeah, huge, and really beautifully expressed, Hugh. And I'm wondering, as you look at the sudden kind of the onset of the coronavirus, COVID-19, coming to our awareness, and then really being in the thick of it as if we were in the flu ourselves, and the contrast with what we thought was just all-consuming, these challenges to democracy and to freedom, as we've known it, into the kind of the liberal Western way of things. I'm wondering, is there, as you described, how you find kind of peace and presence in your practice, is there a difference between what was then, what overwhelmed you then, and what overwhelms you now, and how practice brings some clarity or some presence or ease to each? Is there a difference that you can?
It's a really good question, George. As I see it, wherever we are, whatever the conditions are, we're always going to be dealing with, situations that try our, emotions and our minds, create fear, create anxiety, uncertainty. So I think we're always going to be dealing with life as it's unfolding, and in a sense, the conditions differ, and they become more intense and maybe become more focused, as they are right now. Just the energy of the world is really focusing in on this issue of the virus, its spread, how to limit its spread, what measures need to be taken, what the price and the cost of those measures are in so many ways. And I think what we and other practitioners and teachers of mindfulness and compassion bring to support us all in these times are these skills, are these practices that can bring together the inner and the outer, that can help us transform and open to whatever we're experiencing, whatever way it comes at us, like the fears and the worry in these times and the uncertainty, and to be able to kind of transform it into kindness and compassion and wise action in the world. The image I have is of the Tibetan meditation of Tonglen, the way we very consciously can invite in the suffering of another person, or a suffering of others, or the suffering of the world, and transform that in ourselves and kind of breathe out, breathe in the suffering, breathe out comfort, relief, freedom, peace, ease, whatever will serve. Mm-hmm. So I see these practices, our practices, as being ways of really transforming our own experiences, our own hearts, so that we can really be, in the Buddhist tradition, there's the archetype of the bodhisattva, the being, the awakening being, the being who commits herself or himself or themselves to their own awakening, but also at the same time to the awakening of all beings. And, I think this is a time that really calls on us to be bodhisattvas, to be caring, compassionate beings in whatever way that is expressed. I love what Mother Teresa says, we can't all do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And whatever it is, if we're a healthcare worker, going in and doing our work, our job in the midst of all of this, or if we're just somebody who has to remain at home, so that they don't spread, the virus, or put anyone else in compromising positions, then to do that with an open heart, to do that with compassion, whatever it is, that we're called on to do, to find what is the compassionate and the appropriate response. So kind of, I think that's probably a roundabout answer to what you're asking about the different, what's particular about these times. And I'm thinking that really, we're called to bring our attention perhaps even more closely in this time, because we can get swept up in things perhaps more easily in these times.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. And I some of the things I love about you, I love the way that you really combine, just in your nature, the inside and the outside, and that you understand that as really very much part of the Buddhist practice, part of mindfulness, part of your life really in the world and your purpose. And in regard to that, I want to ask if I may, perhaps an even more challenging question around that, because when I think of the political frame that we sometimes hold, that we held before we came to coronavirus, and obviously lots of people suffering there and requiring kindness and compassion, but there was also kind of a righteous indignation in a way as well toward the forces, the forces of autocracy that seem to be in the ascendance. And sometimes I think and I wonder, one of the great teachings of the Buddha, that was the whole talk, his initial talk about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And in the Eightfold Path, it's really quite wonderfully divided into practice, spiritual practice, and right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And much of right speech, right action, and right livelihood is about kindness, and is about the thought of not getting caught up in the kilesas, the neuroses inside ourselves, and that kindness and graciousness toward others is really a way of keeping ourselves in that way. And the Buddha was occasionally asked very challenging questions about people on a boat, that one person on a boat that was going to kill everybody on the boat, and there were 500 people on the boat. Would you be justified in killing that person? And had there several different responses that I've heard coming from that. But one of the things that I wrestled with as I wrote my last book on a golden civilization was the difference between our response to people and our response to institutions, where the institutions were institutions of enormous power. I call them hierarchies of power. And what I came to feel was that the response of kindness and compassion very much called for whenever we're in conversation with a person. And in a way, we're always in conversation with a person, but to institutions of enormous power, that the virtue of truth was much more important. And so this notion of speaking truth to power, I'm not sure, I don't know enough about the history of the Buddha or Buddhism, but can you talk about that distinction, or how do you hold that, the compassion and the kindness, with these hierarchies of enormous power that are sometimes causing, I mean, one could argue it's beginning to be trickled into Facebook. I'm beginning to see people talk about mass murder because of incompetence at the beginning of the coronavirus situation. How do you hold this balance between speaking truth to power and kindness and compassion, which seems to be the main thing that you work from?
Oh, it's a wonderful question, George. I mean, I don't see them as, I don't see them as contradictory or incompatible. I think one can respond from deep compassion and kindness and yet be fierce in doing so. I remember in the climate change marches, when some friends of mine had a banner that was, I think, fierce compassion. In the Tibetan tradition, there's perhaps more, in a more Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there's more of that sense of the fierceness, the wrathful. And I think that that's really important. I think that we sometimes think, and people think in terms, think of Buddhism, it's like very quiescent. Oh, it's all about just being kind and being compassionate. But it can have that fierce, that it could even be the wrathful energy. The important thing, as you know well, George, is that what it hangs on is their clinging. If the righteous indignation is coming from a place of clinging, then that's not skillful. Then that's going to, in some way, is going to cause harm either to ourselves or to others. So the question, is if there's anger, that anger is coming from, it's information to us, and it's telling us something. If somebody is doing something really harmful, anger may be a very, stop doing that, very clearly to say that, even fiercely to say that, but to have it come from a place of compassion and kindness, so that we're not creating that separation, that me and other, And so when we talk of, when we talk of institutions, again, it's the same thing. If there's that clinging or holding on tight element, if there's a sense of, the institutions, having hate towards the institutions, then that's an unskillful energy. But there can be absolutely, as you say, there can be, and there should be, and there needs to be wise speech, wise action to change those structures of power that keep people locked into relationships of inequality and oppression. Those need to be changed, and to very clearly speak and very clearly act while doing that from an open-hearted place, from a place where we're not creating separation, we're not clinging to, I'm right, you're wrong, but seeing, yes, there is, this is wise action and this is unwise action. Mm-hmm. And so to speak and act in those ways, I think that's, it's one of these, it's the practice of being able to hold that, to be able to, to respond in ways that are compassionate, that are caring, but are still, that are wise and appropriate in that situation. So that's where I, what for me, where it really hangs is, where is this coming from in me? Is it coming from clinging, or is it coming from, is it coming from a place of presence? Is it coming from awareness? Is it coming from wisdom?
And for those of us who haven't done as much of both social action and mindfulness practice as you have done, how would you, is there either a practice or a way of looking at those moments where we're inclined to be snarky, or we're inclined to be outraged and fierce? Is there a way to watch as we engage with the political forces that are out there? What would you suggest for all of us? What would be helpful? How can we identify what our cutting edge is and how to improve who we are in those places?
It's another really good question, George. I think it really is a moment-to-moment practice of coming back and noticing, coming back as you might do and I might do, just in any moment. Notice, okay, what am I aware of in my body? How's my breathing? Am I in that place of a tightness, a sense of separation? And can I, in real time, can I breathe into just being here, touch into that kindness within me, touch into that that wiser place, and see where I'm going into? And this brings up our habitual responses. See when there's that habit energy, because typically it won't be a one-time thing. It won't be just, oh, I got angry with this person because they voted for X. It'll be a pattern that we have. I get caught up in reactivity when I'm with somebody who pushes my buttons politically. So how do I practice? How do I work with that? I think it's really two things. It's the formal meditation practice, opening to our experience when we're meditating, and seeing when we're getting caught up in our own minds in meditation, and practicing coming back to this moment just as it is. And also in our daily lives, making it an ongoing practice, and seeing, perhaps in advance, seeing where we get triggered. This is some of the work that I've done with mindfulness and different habit energies of noticing. You might be a type that tends to push down, I'm just talking hypothetically, kind of repress certain emotions. I might be somebody who acts out those emotions, and to just be clear about how we ourselves tend to respond to particular triggers, particularly, if something is activating us, and to use the practice of mindfulness, of awareness and compassion to pay attention, maybe pay closer attention. If you're talking to your cousin who voted for X, and you have different views on what you think would be best for the country and best for the world, to perhaps in that situation be very conscious of how you're going into that conversation, and be very intentional, of like, what is my deepest intention in this situation, to be able to come back to our intentions, because really everything hangs on our intentions. What is my intention in this conversation? Is my intention to show how smart I am, or how this or that, or is it to be as helpful and as present as I can be in any situation? That's the in the sense, is our task. And so I think in a moment-to-moment way, being awake, we're coming back to our bodies, is a very powerful practice of just, because that's where we're holding a lot of our habit patterns, our habit energies, a lot of our reactivity is right here in the body. So coming back, noticing when we're getting triggered, maybe taking a breath or two, holding off from responding when we see like we want to make that snarky remark to somebody. Can I make another choice? We know that we can come back to this moment, and if we're present here in this moment, we can make a choice. I can choose, I could say that, I could do that, but I could just breathe into this, breathe into what I'm feeling right now, maybe choose not to say anything, or choose to have what I say come from a place of kindness or curiosity. So those are some things that come to me in those kind of situations.
Beautiful. May I ask another question about this? Because it's, I think this is, and it's right up your alley, because this is Hugh's specialty, is this habit change and habit swap, among many specialities, I think, but and with mindfulness. But we're so much online these days, and we're and often what we share online is going sometimes to hundreds or thousands of people. Sometimes it's just one or two, but we're often using it as kind of, we're broadcasting. It's like a little blog. And let's say you get something that you realize that exponentially, that the coronavirus, we might have, instead of possibly losing millions of lives, we might have only lost 10,000 lives. And if the powers that be had paid attention and been concerned. And so in that moment, speaking truth to power, and you seeing that that people are still acting in incompetent ways, how would you, I mean, how to hold that inside oneself so that it has the kindness and compassion, but wouldn't you still have some outrage there, the fierceness that you were talking about? Isn't that a place where you would find it? And yeah, speak to that a bit, Hugh, so we can understand that as well.
Yeah, I mean, naturally, when we receive information, we learn, this could have been very different. I think it's quite, natural for anger to be a response, to feel like anger, judgment comes up. And in terms of firstly, I'd say we bring awareness to that and notice, what am I feeling right now? I'm noticing tightness, tension. I'm noticing a lot of thoughts, about they're doing this, or that, they should have done that. And firstly, I think just to bring awareness to our own reaction, our own way we're responding, and notice if, is there a proliferation of judgments about them out there doing that, and notice if the mind is creating a sense of separation, a sense of righteous me and bad them, with the mind, where the mind, often easily goes to. Is it possible to notice, to see that, and to, at the same time, hold the information and take it in, that, the choices that were made or actions that weren't taken are having a very significant impact, and really allow yourself to feel that, allow oneself to feel that, maybe to get underneath the outrage, maybe underneath that there's sadness, maybe there's some grieving, and to allow ourselves to feel that. And when we do, if we can fully allow ourselves to experience what's coming up for us, I think we can come to the question of what is a wise response, what is an appropriate response, from a place that is less reactive, less tied to separation of self and others. The righteousness, can come from that sense of, I'm right here, or we're right here, and they're doing the bad things there. And so in the sharing of it, on social media, to really pay attention to, what is my intention here? Is my intention to get other people outraged in the way, because I feel really outraged about them, and get them angry with those people who are doing the bad things? And really look at that, and is that a wise intention? Or is my sharing coming from a place of wanting to inform, and then ask yourself, well, what is the purpose of this? What am I trying to do here? And does it come from a place of wisdom, of insight, as well as compassion? Or is it wanting to stir other people up into anger, against the other, the people we see as doing wrong? So I think, as I see it on social media, there can be a lot of the latter, of kind of stirring other people up, and unskillful speech and unskillful action. And at the same time, I think social media can be a place where we can really, that a lot of good things can happen, but it's a place that calls for seriously practicing mindfulness and kindness. Or else we will get triggered, by we'll get activated, we'll be, get into the us and them mentality, and our sharing in those forums will tend not to be helpful. So it's a place for me, I try and pay as much attention as I can, to, is this wise? Is it helpful? Where is this coming from if I'm sharing this, this information or this story or whatever it might be? And, I don't mean that we're always going to be perfect. Just as in our lives, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to get angry, we're going to, be reactive. But if we're really paying attention with kindness, with compassion, then I think it can be a really helpful way of engaging with friends and with people that we don't know. But it calls for a lot of care, I think, a lot of attention.
Lovely, Hugh. Thank you. And I mean, I could go on because there's so many other examples, whether from Martin Luther King or with his righteous indignation, or the Old Testament, the prophets of the Old Testament. There's a wonderful story that Ramakrishna tells in the Hindu tradition of a snake that was a cobra that was a devotee of a great teacher, and the snake was so kind to everyone that the boys, the wild adolescent boys, picked it up and started hanging, hitting it against the ground. And it crawled up to the teacher and said, "What can I do? I'm trying to be kind. I'm trying to be kind." And, and the teacher looks at the snake and just simply says, "Well, I didn't tell you not to hiss."
That's a great story. Yeah, I've heard similar ones. I think Sharon Salzberg tells one about somebody, in the streets of Calcutta, and having a similar, somebody reaching out and trying to grab a purse, and the teacher said, you should have whacked him with your umbrella, but with compassion.
With compassion. Yeah. So it's a complex area, because there's a lot of passion right now, and a lot of a mix of deep sadness and also anger and frustration. And how do we move forward? And so I'll ask you this final kind of question, one more large question, if I may, looping your book and my book together. You've talked a bit already about changing habits and how we pay attention. So the question is, as you know, I've written about golden civilization, and the passion and the image that I have is, let's image it and then let's make it happen within a generation. Let's not dilly-dally, and let's not get lost in compromise. Let's see what really looks like it, and let's make it happen. Let's institute it. And it dovetails beautifully with your habit swap, because although we don't have to go there, but because it involves habits that needs to change inside all of us, but also inside our institutional structures, how we've structured things and everything. I'm wondering how you would see what could make the most extraordinary progression of a movement toward a golden civilization. What single action or set of actions or habit could really launch something that would, in a generation, bring about something that extraordinary? Do you have any thoughts there?
It's a wonderful question, and I think it's at the core of what we're trying to do in our mindful engagement work together and with Kaira Jewel Lingo. For me, it's really kind of exploring the inner and the outer of the how do we bring our inner, in our practices of transforming our own hearts and minds into active engagement with changing institutions, changing structures, creating a world, a more beautiful world. Charles Eisenstein talks about the more beautiful world that our hearts knows is possible, and the golden civilization. I love that what you're doing is kind of creating that vision, because without that vision, it's very hard, I think, to kind of think of, well, how do we move forward when we're in a very, very difficult place, a very trying period in our country and in the world, to be able to see what would be the steps forward, what would it look like, where we're going, and what would be the steps to get there. And I think the practices of working to transform our own hearts, to open fully to our experiences through the practices, through the wise practices of mindfulness and compassion and equanimity, loving kindness, while we're engaging in the world, while we're envisioning, what do we want to create, joining together with others in movements for a more just society, for to take action on climate change, or you know, a whole range of other issues of war and peace. But to have, what I would love most to see is a movement, an activist movement that has a spiritual core, and a spiritual movement that has an activist core.
Wow.
So that kind of weaving together, you know, that it's intrinsic. So it's not so much activists saying, oh, I need a little burst of mindfulness, you know, or spirit, you know, mindfulness practitioners saying, well, oh, we really need to look at what's going on in the world, as well as it kind of on the cushion, that it's really that it is both at the same time. And in that process of work, of kind of transforming both at the same time, we're moving from where we are, you know, where we feel kind of stuck, and where we feel challenged, and where we feel, you know, caught up with, you know, unskillful energies or hatred or all of that, that we can transform those energies into that vision of moving towards the golden civilization, that world that we believe is possible. And I think it's beautiful the way that you kind of put that out there, as it is possible, but we have to, you know, we have to do the work of envisioning it. And so it's that kind of, it's, for me, the most important thing really is the bringing together, is to include all of ourselves, the kind of transforming our hearts, finding freedom, you know, in this moment and in the world, you know, that so that there's not a kind of the work, the inner work and the outer work, that it's really one. And I think that this is the kind of transformation I think that needs, that I think will happen, has to happen really, because for hundreds of years, thousands of years, people have tried to work on, you know, creating a better world. But typically it's kind of, you know, there's a me here and there's a there, and, you know, us here, the world there. But rarely the bringing, you know, the transformation of our own hearts and hearts and minds into that, you know, changing ourselves as we change the world. And I think that that's the task that's ahead of us.
Yeah. Well, that is beautiful. No more questions. I'm going to ask one more favor of you, just to show something here, but I want to summarize that in my own understanding of that. So that was beautiful. I want to listen to it again and again, Hugh. Really, really beautiful. The notion that if we're looking at one single thing that would have the greatest likelihood of transforming this world into a golden civilization within a generation, it's this intermingling, this bringing of the spirit world into action out in the world, and the bringing of the political and social action world into a spiritual depth, so that there is this intermingling coming out into the world just naturally from each and every one of us. Wow, what a beautiful vision. Thank you so much. I think it was that vision that brought us together, because we share it so well. The last thing I wonder if you have a copy of your book right next to you, if you could hold it up here for a few seconds so people can really see it. This is what Hugh has just written.
You can read it better. Trade in your unhealthy habits for mindful ones, habit swap. So there you go.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, my dear friend.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you again.
Enjoy to be with you. Thank you.
God bless. Bye-bye.